Puts the work quickly. Down to 6 seconds. Carr going down again. And it's Quentin Williams this time for the Jets.
Over the middle in the air, picked off. Brian Poole to the end zone, touchdown. The punter to beat, and the punter brings him down. Braden Mann saved a touchdown most likely.
Looks right, fires a bomb down the right sideline again for Mims. What a catch by Denzel Mims.
And welcome back to an episode of the Cool Your Jets podcast. We're your hosts, Ben Blessington and Michael Nania, back with another head coaching candidate profile. This time, one of Michael and I's favorites, Robert Saleh, the defensive coordinator for the San Francisco 49ers. Michael, you're on record as saying Saleh is your favorite candidate. Jets have yet to request an interview with him. First of all, what are your thoughts on Saleh as a candidate? And second of all, do you think they will get around to requesting him?
Yeah, like you said, I think he is my favorite candidate because I think he has that best blend of raw coaching ability and production in terms of the unit that he coaches, because that San Francisco defense was amazing in 2019 and was still really good this year, even with a lot of injuries. So I think he has the best blend of all the different things you're looking for. So that's why he's my personal favorite. But the second part of the question, I don't think that I think it's too good to be true for this Jets team. But if it does play out, I'm all for it. He's definitely, like I said, my favorite.
Yeah, and as with all of these, we're bringing in somebody who knows a hell of a lot more about these candidates, who follows the team, who covers the team. This time, we're lucky enough to be joined by Oscar Aparicio from @BetterRivals. Oscar, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to talk to us about Robert Saleh. How you doing, man?
I'm doing swimmingly. It's a pleasure. Happy to talk about Robert Saleh. I'm sad that we might lose him, but I'm happy because I think he is absolutely deserving of a head coaching gig.
100%. I mean, I thought that he would get a job last offseason. Him and Bieniemy, they kind of hurt themselves by going to the Super Bowl, in the sense that teams a lot of times don't want to wait to get that head coach in the building. I mean, it's just a disadvantage. The longer you have to wait, and you can get impatient, and there's never the guarantee that they'll come to you anyway. So I think, obviously the Niners don't have that luxury this offseason, but I do think Saleh will get a job. It remains to be seen if he'll be with the Jets. But let's hop into him as a candidate. Obviously, he's known as energetic, tenacious. He's the muscle head on the 49ers sideline who's just screaming like a maniac, but he's a hell of a coach to back it up. I mean, I just talk about it as we start off. I mean, the effects that his energy has on this team.
So I think his energy is something a lot of people talk about. He is well known for the 49ers for running bleachers before the game, because he needs to get a lot of his nervous energy out. So you'll see him oftentimes pregame. He's got his headphones on. His pregame ritual is actually running bleachers and then shaving his head. He gives a little big treatment to the head so the cameras can shine nice and bright off the little dome that powers the defense for the 49ers. It's a hell of a pregame ritual. Everyone's got their things. Deion Sanders used to lay his uniform out, gloves and everything on the floor, and Robert Saleh runs bleachers and shaves his head. So he definitely has a lot of energy, and it is infectious. And I think I'm sure we're going to get into the scheme and what he's done for the 49ers defense, but the oftentimes what a coach will do as a coordinator doesn't always translate to a head coaching gig, because surprise, surprise, head coaching gigs are different jobs fundamentally than a coordinator. A coordinator is going to be more about scheme, implementing the pretty pictures that you draw in your head. And a head coach is going to be overseeing quite a bit more. And the thing that makes Robert Saleh really exciting as a head coaching candidate is, by all accounts, he's got both. He's got the schematic ability down pat, but he's also, kind of the leader of men that you hear. He's got the energy. He's got the passion. He's able to motivate groups of men to do things in a singular direction, like win football games. And he's done so over his career with the 49ers with all pro talent and with fifth string, cornerbacks. And he's been able to do it in several different ways. So I think all in all, he's a really, really good package. He's a great human. And I think he's going to make a good head coach.
Yeah. And you touched on some of his other traits in addition to his energy, but what do you think are some of in terms of just his coaching ability? Because we'll talk plenty more about his scheme and what he does defensively, but just in terms of his coaching, in addition to that energy and passion, what has he shown that makes it so clear that he can be a good head coach? Because like you said, we know how passionate and energetic he is. I mean, running stadiums before the game, every single game, is ridiculous. So everyone knows about that. But in addition to that, what he brings to players on a coach to player basis, just as a teacher, getting the most out of them, building relationships. How well does he thrive in those areas? And do they project well to him being a head coach?
So the number one thing I'd say that was surprising about him was his malleability over his career as a 49ers defensive coordinator. So he came from the cover 3 school of defensive thought. He was a Pete Carroll guy. He worked in Jacksonville for a bit. And so you think to yourself, okay, he's going to run the cover 3 defense in San Francisco. That's what he was brought in to do. And he did. His first year, the 49ers were basically an exclusively single high team. They ran a single high defense, whether it be cover 3 or cover 1, like over 65% of the time. And then you're like, okay, now in year 2, what is that system going to be? Now in year 2, you see a few more wrinkles brought in. You see some different blitz pressures. You see a couple different utilizations for stunts on the defensive line. Once you get to year 3, now you're seeing more diverse coverages. You're seeing actually knowing that he's got to do some things on the defensive line. He brings in a new defensive line coach, Chris Kasurik, who implements the wide 9. He brings in another defensive backs coach who does more man coverage stuff and a couple of split safety things. By year 4, he's running 3 different coverages more than 15% of the time. He's running cover 6, cover 4, and cover 3, and sometimes cover 1. He's implementing new blitz schemes. He rolled out a brand new, basically like blitz for Fred Warner against Seattle in what is likely his final game that he hasn't shown on film at all in his 4 years here with San Francisco. And he's just like, we're going to go ahead and hold one of the best offenses to, not a lot of points for 3 quarters. They end up losing the game. But you know what? 10-point leads in the 4th quarter. Not something I want to talk about for the Niners. So it's one of those things where he's shown the ability to learn, implement, and design new things based on personnel, with deficient personnel, with excellent personnel, in a way that like you have to have that in the NFL nowadays. You have to be able to look at a problem, break it apart, and say, how am I going to do it? And it hasn't always been perfect. He's had some kind of missteps here and there, but overall, I think he's done a fantastic job as a defensive coordinator because of his ability to implement new things, take things from other people, and just execute on field.
Yeah, clearly he's a defense first guy. And you talked about a little bit earlier about how he has the traits to become a successful head coach. But the Jets have been specifically looking for that CEO, that leader of men, that guy who's an excellent communicator, an excellent teacher, a guy who's not just going to focus on one side of the ball. What do you envision a Robert Saleh coach team looking like? I mean, he comes from a place in San Francisco where Kyle Shanahan is the head coach, but he runs the offense and Robert Saleh runs the defense. Do you think he would try to implement a similar system? Well, obviously we're going to talk about his staff a little bit later on, where he is the head coach, but he runs the defense and somebody runs the offense. Or do you think he would try to be a little bit more of the CEO? Obviously, he's always going to be involved in the defense, but do you think he would try to delegate some of those things so he can oversee the whole team? Just how do you kind of see him running a team when he does get his head coaching shot?
Him being a defensive play caller is a really interesting question. I actually haven't given too much thought to that, so I don't know whether or not he would call his own plays. I do know that the one thing that gets written about a lot, especially in the Bay Area media, is how much he loves to play chess. He is apparently very, very good at chess. And I think that chess, for all different, if you've seen the Queen's Gambit, right? Maybe chess is making a resurgence, but fantastic show. If you haven't seen it, I would highly recommend it. But he is a strategic thinker. He's able to think on multiple levels. And I think he's able to handle a lot of things in his head, which I think makes him a really good defensive coordinator. But I think that also extends to what he has to do in terms of an organization. It gives him kind of the ability to think about a whole organization strategically in a way that would make him a good head coach. Now, I don't know if he would call defensive plays on his own, but I do think that he would bring a 49er style offense with him to wherever his head coaching gig is going to be. And it's because of Mike LaFleur, which is one of the two Mikes. I always get him confused. There's Mike McDaniel and Mike LaFleur. And Mike LaFleur is Matt LaFleur's little brother. But he and Robert Saleh go way back. And Mike LaFleur was actually the best man at Robert Saleh's wedding. So they're that close.
Wow.
And he has been prevented. Shanahan has prevented Mike LaFleur from moving or even interviewing for other offensive coordinator spots because he wouldn't be getting play calling duties. Well, now 2 things are working against that. A, if he were to go with Robert Saleh, whom he knows incredibly well, he would have play calling duties because I'm sure Robert Saleh would cede that control to LaFleur. But now there's a rule in the NFL that says that you can't prevent assistant coaches from interviewing or accepting coordinator jobs. as long as they are bona fide coordinator jobs. And that's what this would be. So what would that team look like? I think it would be a 49ers style offense, and another branch off the Shanahan tree that is going to be wherever Saleh goes, and then Saleh will be a bit more of the CEO. TBD whether or not he would call his own defensive plays, but it would be an offshoot of a Shanahan 49ers like offense.
And do you think on the defensive side of the ball, when he does go to that new team, and like you said, we don't know if he will call plays. It's anyone's guess as to how that will be operating once he does get that job. But when he does go to a new team, how much of the defensive principles that he runs in San Francisco do you think he will carry over with him to that new team? Because like you said, he already has adapted quite a bit, and he came in and changed based on the talent that they had. So do you think he's going to be that malleable and able to adapt and change based on the personnel to his new team? Or are there some core philosophies that he will bring with him to that new team?
I think that's a great question. I do think that there are some core philosophical bits that he will carry with him. The thing that he did in San Francisco, which was so good, was he started very simple with his defense. Not that NFL defenses are simple necessarily, but as NFL defenses go, it was fairly simple. It was a lot of cover three. It was a lot of the same scheme. And as the players got better in the system, as he got better players, things got more complex. So you zoom forward to year 4, you've got complex blitzes that are checked to. He's putting certain players in positions to succeed. He's able to kind of tinker with the defense as it grows because he knows that his team is growing with it. So I think he's probably going to start off with his more simple cover 3 defense, and then kind of grow as the players in that scheme grows. I do think he's probably learned a bit from the way the Niners built the beginning of their team in 2017 with Shanahan, where you bring in guys that who know your system, who know the culture you're trying to establish. And those are players on the defense like potentially Richard Sherman, who is going to be a free agent. Jaquiski Tart, also a free agent. You've got Ahkello Witherspoon, whom apparently is kind of one of the favorites of Saleh, who is, a bit of a maligned, but still a cornerback for San Francisco, but still a third-round talent who's got all the physical tools and has had a mini resurgence these last 3 weeks in San Francisco. So I think that he's still going to be a initially more simple cover 3 team, a lot of zone, a lot of, he's not going to be a really heavy man or heavy blitz kind of coach, but then you're going to see that develop into who knows what when he gets players, when he gets time, and when he gets other coaches on his staff that are going to be able to implement different things as the team needs it.
Now, obviously, there's a lot of optimism about Saleh becoming a head coach. Trying to avoid this becoming a puff piece for Saleh. If we have to find negatives, because I would imagine that all 3 men on this podcast love the idea of Robert Saleh being a head coach. Are there any concerns you have about him making that jump? Because we've seen plenty of successful coordinators not be successful head coaches. Are there anything that you think that Saleh either hasn't proved or may struggle with when he makes the leap from coordinator to head coach, and especially head coach in the league's biggest market on a losing team?
Yeah, I think really it's 2 things that I think about with the Jets' jobs specifically. And one is unfortunately the nature of the Jets. It's hard to be very successful, even if you are good at a lot of things with the Jets. Part of it is what you said, the market, part of it's ownership, part of it's organization, part of it is the media. I don't think he's going to be, he's going to worry too much about what the media says or thinks. But Robert Saleh, he's only had one defensive coordinator spot, and he's only seen one thing work really successfully as a coordinator, and that's Shanahan, Lynch, and Jay York. He has worked under Schneider and Pete Carroll, another really positive, kind of GM coach union. He's only ever seen what that looks like. And so, I think that there is some maybe organizational agility that he's going to have to figure out and learn. That is, complete speculation on my part. I have no idea how good or bad he is there. I don't see what his kind of day-to-day interactions are with execs or with people. By all accounts, he's very, very good at relationship building and kind of interpersonal stuff. So maybe that's a good thing. The other, I think, is more about what I think about the state of NFL, what makes kind of good and consistent NFL teams nowadays, and that is a consistent offense. We know that offenses are generally consistent year to year, more so than defenses. Even good defenses are going to take a step back some years, and even if they're like top 10, top 12, they're still going to kind of be up and down. Offense is just generally more stable year to year. And even with the Niners right now, yes, we're worried about losing LaFleur. We're worried about losing Mike McDaniel as well. But we're not really all that worried because it's Shanahan's offense. Shanahan's the guy who makes the ship go. We don't have to worry about the offense. We can worry about the defense where you can kind of overcome some things with athletes. So it's one of those things where, yeah, if LaFleur goes to New York and he's with Saleh and they have a good enough year where LaFleur all of a sudden is considered a head coaching candidate, now all of a sudden you've got this kind of like revolving door of offensive coordinators that can't really be solved with maybe a brand new quarterback. And now quarterback is the most important position in football. If you don't have that figured out, then you don't have really your franchise figured out. And so if you don't have the quarterback whisperer, the offensive guy, then maybe if you've got that revolving door, things are problematic. I think the flip side of that's John Harbaugh. John Harbaugh is a special teams coordinator who made it, work as a head coach, and he's figured out that revolving door of coordinators. So I'm not saying that dooms him by any stretch, but I do think that it is a little concerning that, if his offensive coordinator leaves, maybe the offense goes with him, and that would concern me if I'm looking for a head coach.
Yeah, I think you definitely really summed up very well the main concern that most of us as Jets fans have in terms of looking for a defensive head coach, because it's not necessarily that you can't win with a defensive head coach. You mentioned Harbaugh, who comes from a special teams background. You can win with those guys. It's just the importance of offense and the quarterback position, and being able to have the core of your offense in place as the head coach and have him saved from being poached from another team is definitely something that can be valuable. So that is a risk with Robert Saleh and any other defensive head coach. But I think one thing that we wouldn't have to worry about with him is player development. And that's something that the Jets head coaches in recent years, or their last few, have really struggled with. So who do you think are some of the players that best exemplify some of the development that Saleh has been able to foster in that defense? Because the Niners, from the time he went there, he took in a defense that gave up the most points in the league the year before he came in. And then he brought them up to maybe the best unit in the league in 2019, won the Super Bowl. And then this year they were very good, maybe even elite, even without many of their best pieces. So who would you say are some of the players, especially young pieces who they drafted, that best exemplify how well he's been able to develop young talent there?
Yeah. So one thing to kind of to egg that analysis on, really, just before I get into the specific player, because there's one that I'm thinking of very specifically, but you think of what Robert Saleh did this season with his defense, and the defense. I mean, you're talking about Jason Verrett and a rotating door of Emmanuel Moseley and Ahkello Witherspoon at corner. This is basically like a recovery unit in terms of Jason Verrett, who hasn't played football in a long time and was injured last year, and a third-round pick and an undrafted free agent. You've got Jimmy Ward and you've got Jaquiski Tartt, sometimes Marcel Harris. They were 5th in overall EPA per play against the pass, or 5th overall as a defense, 9th against the pass, 5th against the run. If you look at their PFF coverage grade, they were 4th, with not like elite pieces at corner or safety, but they had the 4th best PFF coverage grade. They had the 29th highest PFF pass rush grade, because of course you lose D Ford, you lose Bosa. They had no one at pass rush. They had Ezekiel Ansah for 7 minutes. You've got Dion Jordan who's playing. Like, this is a defensive coordinator who is imaginative enough to take all of these pieces and still put together a top 10 efficient defense in the NFL. That's remarkable. And a big reason that happened is because of Fred Warner. And that's the player, I think, if you're looking for development. Fred Warner was drafted in the 3rd round by the 49ers. He was drafted under this regime. He's seen no other coaching staff, no other defensive coordinator than Robert Saleh. And Robert Saleh knew what he had immediately with someone like Fred Warner. He had the green dot year 1. He knew it'd be a little rocky, but he's blossomed into a Pro Bowler this year. I think one of the 2 best linebackers inside linebackers in football, in large part because of what he does in coverage. What he can do carrying crossers up the seam, what he can do in man coverage. I mean, the guy is remarkable, and he really has blossomed and developed under Saleh. And I think it's because Saleh recognizes that, you need modern linebackers, you need coverage linebackers first. And yeah, you got to worry about the run. And yes, you talk about, stopping the run and all that stuff, but it's a passing league. You have to have linebackers that stop the pass. But I think he also found a kismet spirit in someone who was really, really smart. And I think that they speak the same language in that regard. And Fred Warner is hardly ever in the wrong spot. The guy is just is so good at diagnosing plays and making his initial reads and reading his keys. He was the defensive MVP this year. He won the Bill Walsh Award, which is given to the team's MVP voted on by coaches. and he won the Len Eshmon Award, which is basically the player voted MVP. There's not very many players that do that. I think there's only 2 players in 49ers history who have done that. So it's definitely a remarkable growth for Warner. And I think it's in large part because of what he's, obviously he's seen no other coaching staff in San Francisco. And he's now one of the best linebackers in the league.
So when you think of or picture Saleh as a head coach, what moments come to mind to you that sort of made it clear that he is going to be someone else's head coach someday, whether it's a particular game, an adjustment he made during a game, or a coaching moment, any just individual something he said to a player or a player he really helped grow, any individual moment in time where you looked at something he did and thought, okay, that guy is going to be someone's head coach?
So for me, it comes back to what you are able to put on the field. I think that's the most tangible that someone who watches the game has, because we can talk about, I'm not as close or tied into the day-to-day interpersonal stuff that he might have, right? So I'm not going to sit here and say, like, I know him as a person or a man. By all accounts, he's great. But what I can extrapolate based on what he puts on the field is he is able to have one game plan in one week and a completely different game plan another week, all within the same structure. You look at week 1 against the Arizona Cardinals this season. The Niners are primarily a single high team. They played over 60% cover 4 because they knew they were going against a spread offense. They knew they had a lot of things to cover, and they tried a couple of different things with kind of field boundary cornerbacks, and some of it worked, some of it didn't, but they were by and large a cover 4 team. Same thing happened in week 2 because they saw another wide open team. By week 3, they're playing 60% cover 1. And it's like, okay, you're very clearly actually tailoring a game plan specific to the team that you're seeing. And that's pretty neat. On top of that, he's not afraid to take and incorporate really great ideas. The Niners use a wide 9 scheme right now, but they didn't always. Chris Caserta coming in and Jim Washburn and all that stuff, that's within the last 2 years. That wasn't a part of the Niners defensive scheme the first 2 years. So he is absolutely not afraid to say, you know what, that's a good idea. And I'm going to incorporate that because I think it's a good idea and I think it will work for the people that I have. And I think as a head coach, fundamentally, that's what at least from what I've seen, what separates really good head coaches from not good head coaches is the ability to say, that's a good idea, to have the lack of ego to say, I'm going to incorporate and steal that idea, and being able to tune those ideas based on the personnel and the scheme and the people that you have, and then making it all work. I think too much rigidity, too much ego is ultimately what dooms you as a head coach, among other things. And so I think that's probably what I would point to is I would say, you look at what he's done over his tenure here with the 49ers, and it's pretty remarkable. Whether or not he's had talent or not, he's had a defense that's produced, whether it be in high profile moments or in Super Bowl running seasons. And I think overall he's really, really good at what he does.
Yeah, it sounds like flexibility and versatility are some of the words you're using to describe Robert Saleh. When you think of his philosophy as a head coach, and not just as a defensive coordinator, but as a head coach, are those some of the words that come to mind to describe a Robert Saleh head coach football team? What are some of the other words that you think, if he becomes the head coach of the Jets or the Lions or wherever it is, that opening press conference or that opening meeting with the team, what are some of the things you think he's going to preach as the philosophy, that vision for the team?
So he's used two catchphrases that have become synonymous with his time here with the 49ers. And one is all gas, no brakes. And the other is extreme violence. He's used both of those at different times. Yeah.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah. He's definitely, he's admitted to blacking out on the sidelines at times because he gets so amped up that, when the defense makes a good play, they cut to him on the sidelines because he's always just like jumping up and down and cheering on his team. He's fully admitted that sometimes he blacks out. He doesn't remember that part of it because he's so excited and so into it. I think players really buy into that enthusiasm. I think he is going to be a head coach that preaches playing fast. I think he's going to be a head coach that preaches, and what defensive coordinator doesn't, say hit hard, play fast, right? But I do think he's going to have the energy to match. And by and large, I think that he's going to be a very energetic head coach, but also a very strategic and thoughtful and measured head coach. And that balance doesn't always happen, right? I think sometimes you get really energetic guys that operate and vibrate at a really high frequency. And then you get really analytical guys that maybe just like are kind of terse and don't really play well with the media. I think he's got a good blend of both, which is why I think he's being considered for head coaching gigs.
And if he does land one of those head coaching gigs, it's obviously going to be important for him to build a staff that can kind of help him maintain that balance. Guys who bring that fire, but also who are analytical, smart, can plan like he can. So wherever he goes, what sort of staff do you see him building? And especially two guys you mentioned that you are afraid of losing, Mike McDaniel and Mike LaFleur. Do you see those two guys going with him, one or both of them? What do you see his staff looking like with his new team?
Yeah, I see one of them coming, probably LaFleur because they're so close. The Niners, Shanahan has admitted to doing some horse trading already with Saleh in case he gets a gig to say like, okay, you can have him, but not him. So I don't know that he's going to raid the staff entirely, but I do think LaFleur is someone who's likely to go with him. Someone who I think would really, the Niners would really hate to see leave would be D'Amico Ryans. D'Amico Ryans is, longtime linebacker for the Houston Texans, and that's where they met because he was, a defensive assistant with the Texans, also where Saleh met Shanahan. And D'Amico Ryans is the linebackers coach for the Niners. He's actually he's being considered as a replacement for defensive coordinator if Saleh goes. So if Saleh's like, hey, we have a defensive coordinator gig that's open, we might want to bring you with. If Shanahan wants to go with a more established candidate, then that might be someone who could come with him as well on the defensive side. I do think on offense, if you're looking at potential other people that have been in the Niners orbit that may be available, Rich Scangarello, who was a quarterbacks coach in San Francisco, also an offensive coordinator for Denver for a season. He's someone who is very, very familiar with the Niners system, who may be available. So he might be part of that staff as well. I think part of being a good head coach is being able to bring good staff with you. And I do think that he's got connections to people that are well respected and well regarded in the NFL.
Yeah, and we talked about it right at the beginning that the Jets have not requested an interview with Robert Saleh. I've seen all the reports of Richard Sherman and some of his players saying that he has to get the Lions job, and he seems like he's the favorite in Detroit. Where do you see Saleh ending up? Do you think he would be a good fit in a team like New York in a big market with some question marks? Do you think it makes more sense to him to go back to Michigan and coach the Lions? I mean, where do you think the best fit for Saleh is, and where do you think he ultimately ends up?
Do you guys have a general manager opening, or is it just
no? It's just fortunately we like to think that we actually do have a good general manager in Joe Douglas because he's only had one draft and it was relatively good. Although we did go 2-14, but we're gonna pin that on Adam Gase and the other GM's failures. But we like our GM for right now.
Okay, so I think that's part of it. I think because he's seen what a good GM, good head coach marriage looks like. He saw it in Seattle. He saw it in San Francisco. I think obviously the Detroit ties are there because he's a native Michigander, Michigander is always a word that just sounds funny when you say it out loud, but he's a native of Michigan. And so that's why I think that link is obviously there. Going to your hometown team is a great story. But Detroit doesn't have a ton of cap space. And if you're looking as a head coach, if you get to choose a spot, you're going to choose a spot with a lot of cap room. You're going to choose a spot where either they have the quarterback thing figured out, or you get to choose your quarterback at the top of the draft. And you're going to choose a place ideally with a ton of cap space so you can make moves to establish your culture, maybe pay a fullback 3 times the going rate. I don't know. That's because Juszczyk was originally going to sign with the Jets. And I think the Jets actually gave him more. They offered him more money. And that's why the Niners gave him as much money as they did, because they were in a bidding war with the Jets for Kyle Juszczyk's services. But the Niners ended up getting Kyle Juszczyk, and now, of course, he may not be United for much longer. But that's one of the reasons we have a
so you're saying we can add him to the list of almost Jets?
Yes, almost, yes. And maybe a jet in the future, because he's another player that if you get Robert Saleh and he brings LaFleur with him, then, what's one of the guys that's going to help build the culture? Well, the fullback, the versatile fullback who is kind of, blocker / whatever. If you guys want to pay $23 million for a fullback, hey, be my guest. I'd rather spend that money somewhere else. But I think that if you're looking at places, Detroit's there, but Detroit doesn't have a lot of cap space. Jacksonville, I think, is a really, really desirable spot for a lot of head coaches because they've got the first pick in the draft, because they've got a ton of cap space, and because you'd be able to bring a general manager with you. And there's a couple of general manager candidates in San Francisco that would be good. Martin Mayhew is one, and Adam Peters is another. Both of them are in the Niners front office and I think able to do the GM gig. So that's the only thing I think that might turn someone off from that gig is like, if I could go someplace where I know I'm going to work well with the general manager because I get to pick them, and I've got the quarterback thing figured out, and I've got cap space, that might be a bit more desirable than a place like New York.
And so to wrap it all up on Saleh, if he does land with the Jets, what would your pitch be to Jets fans as to why he is the correct decision and why he is the guy who can turn around a team that has missed the playoffs 10 years in a row, won 2 games this year, blew the number 1 pick? Why is Robert Saleh the guy who can turn it around?
One, he's not going to do smelling salts on the sideline. It is all natural energy. Nor will you have to worry about the size of his pupils at press conferences. Number one, I think that's going to be where you start. Number two, he's not an a-hole. So he's not going to alienate a bunch of people like sometimes some coaches have done in New York. And then finally, I would say that, you know, you've got a defensive coordinator who, in a year where he lost Nick Bosa, Richard Sherman, Dee Ford, Solomon Thomas, and DeForest Buckner, had a rookie in Javon Kinlaw and a newly signed Eric Armstead, and Fred Warner, whom he developed from a 3rd-round pick into one of the best, you know, linebackers in the NFL. Dre Greenlaw, a 5th-round pick at linebacker. And he took a defense that played historically good in 2019, and we all knew they were going to drop off. They were going to regress to the mean. We thought if they could just be top 15, they'd be good. And they still ended 5th in overall EPA per play. That man can withstand a lot. And I think that if you're looking at the storms that are going to hit you in New York, that's where you're looking at a man who's got resolve to withstand a lot. And both on the field and as a human, I think he can do both. And so that would be my pitch ultimately.
I mean, I think that's a hell of a pitch, particularly the first 2 points. But the third one is important because that's really all you can look at when you look at a coordinator's making a leap to the head coaching position is you have to evaluate. Like a guy like Eric Bieniemy is very attractive, but you know, how much is his success due to Patrick Mahomes and Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce and Andy Reid? When you look at a coordinator like Saleh, who's lost everything and he's still producing, it shows that man can coach. That man can get the best out of the group of men that are in front of him. Now, questions remain: can he be a head coach? I certainly think he can. Oscar and Michael, I believe you two do as well. But let us know at CYJ Pod. Tweet us your thoughts on Robert Saleh. Personally, Michael and I know he said it like 5 times now, but our favorite for the head coaching job. We'll see if he gets an interview. Fingers crossed he does. But Oscar, we really appreciate you taking time out of your day to talk to us about Robert Saleh. Where can our listeners find you? You have some great stuff. I mean, obviously Niners focus, but some general just football brilliance. So just let us know where they can catch you.
You can always follow me on the Twitters at Better Rivals. I tweet a lot of stuff there, and every now and again the Niners play the Jets, and so we'll talk. If you want to talk Frank Gore, happy to talk about Frank Gore.
I think we've had enough of Frank Gore after he cost us.
I think we've had enough. We've had enough.
That's enough.
Come on,
Frank
you
Gore
don't
for
want
1 year.
year 22 of Frank Gore, year 27 Frank Gore. You
We've
sure?
had enough of the weekly CBS graphics with all of his new records.
Come on, you can just go ahead and have him and his son play on the team at the same time. It'll be great.
That would be cool. I'd be fine if we could get Frank Gore Jr., but Frank Gore's going to have to concede some reps to Jr. at some point.
Yeah, at some point. Who knows when it's going to happen. But yeah, happy to talk Jets, Niners. Happy to talk Niners or general football at Better Rivals on Twitter.
Okay, I think the next time the Jets play the Niners is in 2024. So I think our team's going to look a lot different. But perhaps Robert Saleh will be the head coach of the New York Jets when that day rolls around. Maybe the Jets will actually –
maybe he'll trade us.
Go ahead.
Maybe he'll trade us Sam Darnold. Who the hell knows?
That's what I was going to literally maybe they'll both have their own quarterbacks. Maybe it'll be Sam Darnold versus Justin Fields. The possibilities are endless, but Oscar, again, we really appreciate you coming on. You can follow me at Ben W. Blessington, Michael_Nania. Find our podcast, iTunes, Spotify, JetsXFactor.com. As I said, tweet us at CYJ Pod, your thoughts on Robert Saleh. I think he'd be a hell of a hire. Let's hope the Jets can submit an interview pretty soon because I know Michael and I would be ecstatic.
It's Quentin Williams this time for the Jets.
Over the middle in the air, picked off. Brian Poole to the end zone, touchdown. Hunter to beat, and the punter brings him down. Braden Mann saved a touchdown, most likely.
Looks right, fires a bomb down the right sideline again for Mims. What a catch by Denzel Mims.